Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you watch this video and listen to this. My name is Jim Gale. I am coming to you from our off-grid family homestead here in St. Cloud, Florida, where we produce all of the food, water, and energy that we need on our land here. And first off, you are invited to visit. We have a bunch of Airbnbs, tiny homes. In fact, I'll show you where I'm sitting here. So I'm here in the original tiny home that we created on this property. It was used for about a year as my office while we lived in a standard HOA community and we rented. And I would have moved here and I would have lived in that RV if my wife and family would have allowed us to, but they weren't quite ready for that. So we got our house done, which is right over here. You can kind of see the roof of it. So now we're living in that house as of December 1st. And what a journey it has been. This living off grid in this way has been my goal for quite a few years. And being that not many people have done this, I didn't know how to achieve my goal other than just to keep moving forward. Right? A lot of people are there in the world right now. A lot of people are looking for an alternative way to live than what they're currently living. Because there's something coming up inside of us. Right? I call it spirit, right? It's awareness, God, divine messages, whatever you want to call this. But there's something pulling at us right now, and it's saying there's a better way. Well, the questions that I've been asking for now about 2 decades have been, what is the better way? What is the way that we're intended to live when we take out all of the craziness, all of the deception, all of the lies, all of the insanity that we witness around the world right now? And we get back to, what is the simple, loving, community, service, family, friends, joyful, abundant way to live? I feel like I've landed, right? In the place is called Galt's Landing. Right? My last name is Gale. It was one, I guess it's one letter off. In fact, it's interesting when I speak voice to text, right? When I hold the button and I send somebody a text message, I say, hey, come check out Galt's Landing, or I'm here at Galt's Landing, or when are you going to visit Galt's Landing? And most of the time, I have to go back in and change Galt's because it says God's Landing. And after a while, I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to, everybody knows what I texted, or even if they don't, this seems like a divine coincidence that it's coming up, because what I feel like is this is God's Landing, right? A place of abundance, a place of joy. And I'm going to stand up on the rail here and show you something. So right, there's our house over there. This is our solar panels. This is our first little tiny home here. And we have a food forest. We live in the Garden of Eden. Look at this. This is just paradise. 26 months ago, there was nothing here but sand. And now we've got zapote and ice cream bean and avocado and sugar cane and Mexican sunflower and loads of bananas and longans and lychees and figs and avocados and lemons and limes and mulberries and grapefruit and tangerines and loquats and raspberries and blueberries and blackberries and multiple types of grapes and you name it. We've got about 250 different types of edible and medicinal plants around here. There's sweet potatoes on the ground. There's turmeric and ginger and basil and Jamaican cherry. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And my friends, this is the way. This is how we do it. This is how we overcome the insanity. It's so simple. It's when we take out the poisons of our lives and we use our land wisely, right? This is the message that I am very inspired to get across to you. This fruit tree, this sapote, and this ice cream bean, right? And that sugar cane and this fig, these plants, along with this ground cover, is far, far less maintenance than a lawn. In other words, it's essentially no maintenance. If all we did were design this system and put it into the ground, and then at the beginning, when it's a baby, when it's young, we love it, right? Which means we give it some irrigation. Maybe we observe and interact with the system. Maybe we add some worm castings or some compost tea, which all of this is simpler than it sounds, right? Once you know how to do it, it's really simple. Nature does really 99% of the work, and over time, it's 99.9, right? But at the beginning, just like a baby, you got to take care of the system a little bit. It's a living thing, right? So it's still, though, even with what I'm saying, it's still far, far less maintenance than a lawn. And look at that. Would you want to live here? Well, you can in your own zone. This can be done everywhere, my friends, right? With permaculture design and with the systems that we are putting in place. Dr. Wolf is one of our Earth Council members, thank God, with his passion and his wisdom and his courage. He is helping us with a lot of the different elements to create a new society, the foundation of a new world, a world that simply uses our resources and abides by a set of ethics, right? There's different ways to look at this, but just the permaculture ethics are so simple. Earth care, people care, and future care. Reinvesting the surplus that we have to earth care and people care. You know, I actually feel compassion for a lot of these billionaires and wealthy people around the world who are causing so much harm because of their own fear. They are hoarding and they are desiring to control, right? Well, control is an illusion, right? We are here on this plane. We have no real control over what's going to happen, right? The only thing that I intend to control, which is even maybe the wrong word, but just to allow, is my spirit to soar, is presence and connection. And how do we do that? Well, we start by taking a deep breath and feeling our hearts, our stomachs, our fingertips, right? And if you want to do this with me, some psychologist, some famous guy, I'll figure out who this is afterwards and I'll maybe remember next time to say it, but said all of man's problems come from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone, right? And of course, man being plural for men and women. That's true. When we can sit quietly, peacefully, or walk or run or move, but the point is have a quiet and a peaceful mind, right? Have you ever experienced when your mind gets away from you and creates anxiety or fear or worry or humiliation or shame or anger or pride or rage or envy, jealousy, or any of these things? Of course you have. We're human. And these are the 7 deadly sins, so they're called. And by the way, sin is just, there's 4 definitions for the word sin. And missing the mark is the one that makes me laugh the most, because, we've been called sinners. And well, in the process of missing the mark, right, or erroring, that's the other, it's error, or to err or miss the mark is to sin in ancient Hebrew or whatever. And so I laugh at that, because we are sinners, because we're simply just missing the mark, the point of this existence, of this life, of this game, Leela, the divine game. So how do we overcome this struggle and these pursuits that are meant to solve a problem, and the problem itself is the illusion, right? Well, you sit quietly in your mind alone, walking meditations. Let your mind, allow your mind to relax. Now, what we have is we have habits of thought that are built up and programmed into us over time through family first, and then culture, and then the corporations and the military industrial complex and the media industrial complex and the medical industrial complex, which is all controlled by BlackRock, by the way. And it's worth noting, right? I believe, and maybe I'm wrong about this, right? Maybe it doesn't matter if we know what the actual problem is, but I feel very, I'm glad that I am aware of the problem at a significant level. And what it took for me to become aware of this problem is a lot of study. I've done the study. You don't need to do the study. In fact, if I could get back a dozen years of my life, and I mean literally the actual time that I've spent studying on the computer or reading books or listening to audio tapes, is probably 4 or 5 years, right? Over a 20-year period, I've probably spent 20 to 25% of my time studying the problem. So you don't need to do it. I'll just share with you what it is. It's unconsciousness. It's the programs. It's the inability to have a mind at peace. And this is all by design. It is all by intention, right? There is something that I, for lack of a better word, concept, call evil. And this is not something to fear. It's something to be aware of. What is evil? Well, it's anything that is a contraction of life, of spirit, of energy, of creativity, of love, of service, of willingness, right? Of courage. Anything that brings your mind to a place which causes stress and anxiety, let's just, for simple terms, call that evil. How do we overcome evil? Well, again, I have shared this many times. I grew up in Minnesota. I learned about a particular guy named Jesus Christ. I was in the Catholic Church, and I recognized all the horrors that have been caused by these entities that pretend that they're the gateways to source and spirit and God, right? Now, what I'm saying is, I don't hate anybody if they grew up on the other side of the world and they have a different perspective. In fact, I will embrace them as long as they're not trying to cause harm. And even if they are, I will recognize that they're doing the best they can based on their level of BS, right? Bad science, programmed belief systems, and that are all bullshit. So how do we overcome? Take a deep breath and feel. Feel the now. That's where all the answers are. And this is not just me talking. This is very well documented in science, in real science, right? Joe Dispenza knocks it out of the park on this, if you've heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza. And so do many, many more, Greg Braden and many, many more. Bruce Lipton, I've seen him speak as well and in person. And oh my gosh, this guy was a scientist. He was a complete atheist. He thought this idea of God's spirit source was for ignorant, insane people who simply wanted to believe because they were scared of the alternative. And then as he was unpeeling the layers of the cell, he, through scientific study and method, saw that our cells, our DNA, they're like receptors. And by the way, if you ever blame your DNA for any problem in your life, that is a deception. It's a program, right? We all have our own DNAs. And yes, our family histories are recorded via our DNA. So do we have pathways that are more in alignment with the DNA that we have? Absolutely. But imagine that your DNA is a map of the United States. And imagine that you want to get from California to New York, right? Well, if you plug in that into your little iPhone or whatever it is, it'll give you a primary route that'll take, 38 hours or whatever. And then if you say choose a different route, it'll choose a different route. Well, that's what the DNA is. It's a map of infinite routes, of infinite possibilities, right? So when you blame your DNA for your weight or diabetes or cancer or any particular thing, you're not recognizing how it actually works. Now, a lot of family, I talk to people in families, oh yeah, no, it's in the DNA. Look at my family. Oh yeah, did you eat dinner or lunch together? Did you eat out of the same refrigerator? Did you have the same cupboard of chips and donuts? Of course you did, because you grew up in the same family. And this has been studied over and over. The people who grow up, you take twins and who have exactly the same DNA at birth, right? And if they are separated and brought into different environments, and in fact, there's one story, these two twins, one of them was a very successful entrepreneur. And the other one was incarcerated at a young age and lived his whole life in the prison system, right? When the reporters who were doing a little study on twins went to the entrepreneur and said, how did you get this way? And he said, well, it was really my dad. My dad pushed us hard, and I give credit to him for my success in life. Then they went and visited the guy in jail, the twin, the brother in jail. He said, how did your life get this way? He said, it was all my dad's fault. He is the reason that I'm in jail, right? So you've got two radically different circumstances. They both cited the same influence, and yet, well, we know now that that is just a bunch of BS, right? Belief systems that lead to actions. So checking your belief systems, anytime that you feel yourself lose your presence, your consciousness, your awareness, the breath, for me, is the greatest tool. You might have a better tool, right? Whenever I feel myself, in fact, I'll share a story. I've shared a bunch, and I think it's so important and so relevant. BlackRock and the government are the same thing. BlackRock is the corporation that created the computer named Aladdin. I'll share a little bit about AI and GI and how this all ties in here in a second. But I was standing right over there, I do a lot of walks through the food forest because I love it. Right? When you have a system, a living system like this, it will call to you. It'll say, "Come walk barefoot through me," and you will, and you'll enjoy it, and you'll heal, and you'll feel the presence of God. So anyway, I was standing there, and all of a sudden my phone rang, and I picked it up, and my buddy Carlos was over here in front of our houses. And he said, "Jim, there's a guy here with a clipboard and a badge, and he's asking about building permits." Well, I've recognized now for quite a while that there's only one way to overcome this insanity, and it's through presence and faith and courage, and also the strategy of service and demonstrating solutions and service in a way that cannot logically be denied by anybody, right? So I'll get more into that in a second. But I've been preparing for this moment for a while. And so I had a wave of fear, a wave of anxiety go through my body. You felt that before. Everybody has, right? And maybe you're not aware of it because you're so disconnected to your feelings. But when something like that happens to me, I go, "Ooh, man," it just goes. And because I've been practicing presence for a while. And I had this wave, and then I've taught myself this habit, right? A lot of habits are destructive. Well, turn those habits inside and ask the question, how can we turn that around? And you will, by asking the question, by the way, the question and into the feelings is the gateway to the solution, right? Ask a new question. Questions are infinitely better than affirmations because they open up the mind. Right? You want questions. The right questions are the key to all of it. So I'll get into that in a second. So I took a deep breath. I felt the wave, and I go, I am standing in the power of God, in the power of spirit, in the presence. The present is the gift from God. I'm standing here, and I know that what the government represents is killing life on Earth. Black Rock is an intention, not just a name. And so I stood up. I stood up straight. I started walking, and it was maybe a 200-yard walk, right? So it took me maybe a minute or something. And on my way, I grabbed my phone, and I saw that. Then I came through the food forest, and I saw the guy standing there. And I walked up to this fellow, and I said, "Hello, my name is Jim Gale, and I'm recording this conversation just so we don't mix up any words here. How did you get?" And then he said, "Hi, my name's Alexi." I said, "Okay, nice to meet you. And how did you get permission to come on my private land? It's posted. Implied consent is not granted." Because a lot of governmente, which means mind control, officials believe that they have the right to show up on your private land, in your private space. My friends, we've been programmed for a long, long time to obey our slave master. Freedom starts with no longer obeying the slave master. Right? Well, it starts with faith and courage. And then from faith and courage, we no longer obey any system, any entity, any human, any corporation, any policy that causes harm. Right? So I've been settling into this faith and courage for years. And it doesn't have to take you but a minute, but an instant. But anyway, it took me a while. And now I'm aware. So I said, "What's your name?" He said, "My name's Alexi." And I recognized that he seemed like a fairly nice guy because he kind of backed off a little bit. He didn't get all puffy, right? He just kind of went, "Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. The gate was open. So I just came in. And I will leave if you want me to." Huh. Okay, well, that was the right thing to say, right? And I'm not talking about force and violence here at all. I'm just talking about how I felt. The way that he responded to my declaration and my comments was that of, well, willingness, to say the least. He was willing to hear me and not act like a jerk, right? Because he did not truly have any power, by the way. And this is something that when you know this deeply, it helps a lot. His power was not granted by any authority that I respect. And it's also constitutional. There's case law backing it up and all that stuff. So he said, I will leave if you want me to. And I said, okay, well, maybe that's a good idea. But first, I'd like to share with you what we are here for and what we are all about. I said, we are here to serve. We are here to be stewards of this land. What your office and the government above that office will allow me to do as a slave is destroy this land, is use poisons on this land. In fact, they'll even subsidize the poisons at times. And they'll help me. And they'll create a biological desert, a death zone, as reflected in all of these communities around here. Look at these communities. Look at the lawns, look at the poison use, look at the resource use, look at the insanity, look at the sickness. This used to be a natural environment with a lot of life. And now these communities that you are actually walking around and checking off as far as they've done it right are killing this land. And we're in the food forest. When I was sharing this, I said, we are here because the food supply chain is, well, it's already failed, right? The food supply chain isn't going to fail. It has failed. And you can see that reflected in the health of our nation and of our world, especially our nation, by the way, right? My family's from Costa Rica. I lived there for almost 12 years. I've lived in 7 countries or visited, and I talk to people every day, pretty much every day, from all around the world. Europe, different places, Russia. They don't allow the type of stuff that our government buys and spreads around like candy. They don't even allow it. It's illegal and unlawful, right? And there's the difference between legal and lawful. Legal is the undoing of God's law, of natural law. Lawful is God's law, right? It's do no harm. It's serve and steward and build and create and manifest and grow. So after I shared with him about 15, 20 minutes, he got tears in his eyes and he said, Jim, I'm 100% with you. I will never bother you again. Well, that's fantastic. So we became friends, right? And then just last week, I wonder what day, I think it was right after I did the talk last week, a woman came here, Amaryllis Rivera. If you, by the way, are in Osceola County or know anybody who is in Osceola County, Florida, here, Central Florida, then please be aware of a woman running for sheriff. Her name is Amaryllis Rivera. She was introduced to me by somebody who's awake and knows what's going on. And they said, she's a good person. She knows what's happening and she's really good. In fact, her name was Kelly Wiseman. She's a wonderful woman as well. And she said, maybe you can come to a little dinner tonight we're having. And Amaryllis will be there. And her husband, who is like one of the lead detectives in this county, right? And so I go with high hopes and I meet this gal, Amaryllis, and I really like her energy. And just the things she has to say, she's very thoughtful. So I invited her to Gulf's Landing and she came here last Wednesday and we walked around the food forest and I shared with her that I will not comply with the legal system. Now she's running for sheriff and I'm telling her that I will not comply with the legal system if it is unlawful. Now, what does that mean? Well, The use of glyphosate is legal, but it's unlawful, right? All sorts of things like that. So after walking her around and sharing with her my desire to collaborate, right? My goal, our goal here, not just here, but we're setting up these systems all over the world. In fact, they're called Freedom Farm Academies. If you're interested in living completely free, off grid, where you produce not only all of the food, water, and energy that you need to thrive, but also if you'd like to become an education and demonstration site, if you'd like to give tours, if you'd like to have a wellness center, if you'd like to be a food producer, we need you. Right? The world needs you. This is the most important and timely mission that I'm aware of in the world right now. If I was aware of another more important one, I'd be doing that. So I shared with her that we have a solution for crime. And as sheriff, if she wins the seat, she will have the ability to take over the prisons in this county, the one jail. And I said, here's how we do it. The inmates start growing some of their own food. And as a result of this, the recidivism rate will fall by more than 50%. How do I know that? Because it's been done multiple times and it works. Now, let's just step into that for a second. Wait a minute. The recidivism rate that is a 50% reduction in. That's the end of the majority of crime. More than 50% equals a majority. Now we're talking about the end of the majority of crime. That's a big deal, right? And I presented that deal to Bobby Kennedy when I sat with him not too long ago, and shared it, and he's like, this is great, right? I'm not a fan of any government officials, but we're inviting all of them to work with us, because it's better than if they work against us. Do you agree? So anyway, she left here completely aligned. She said, I can't argue with anything you're talking about. It's right, because it is, right? It builds life. And so my goal is to help her become elected as the Osceola County Sheriff, and to then collaborate with her office, right? And by the way, the sheriff is the most powerful, at least from the government perspective, entity, office in the land, more powerful than the federal government. Isn't that interesting? So the way these stars are aligning, it can be nothing other than divine intervention. I'm a math guy. I did $1.3 billion in mortgages. I get numbers really well. And I often ask the question, or I used to, when it started really blowing my mind, I would ask the question, how is this possible? Mathematically, there's no way that could happen. and it's now happening every day. Like there's some synchronicity, some cooperative incidents, right? A coincidence that happens every day that just blows my mind again. I'm like, yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is beautiful. So anyway, Amaryllis, I'm very excited to support you for sheriff, and then to collaborate with you, not only in prisons, but what about schools? Can you imagine if we've got a bunch of the people in that office, the sheriffs and the deputies, that we get groups of people together and we go into the schools. And by the way, there's a school here called Creative Inspiration Journey School. What a name. And we put a big food forest in that school, right? Beautiful food forest. So now the kids, and they have ducks and chickens and goats, and they have a food forest in their playground. How cool is that, right? Well, what would happen if we took the poisons out of the school system and kids grew their own food? Well, I could tell you what would happen. The majority of childhood dis-ease and disease would be done. We take the poisons out and we use our land wisely, and we heal the kids. We heal the inmates. We heal the opportunity zones. We put food forests throughout these opportunity zones. What's another name for an opportunity zone? A slum, a ghetto, a food desert, where more people are suffering from dis-ease and disease than the average HOA community, right? So we put food forests, we take the poisons out, and we put living systems. And it's not only the food that will heal these people, it's the frequency, the energy, the butterflies, the birds, the song. You can feel it here. It's like a symphony of life. So we have the idea whose time has come. Victor Hugo said there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. This is it. It starts with you being the change. It starts with you in your heart and in your mind. It starts with faith and courage. And why is that so logical? Because fear is a contraction of everything good, including the creative ability to solve problems. Anxiety, fear, depression, all of these energetic, low energy forms, these frequencies, are the biggest problem. When you become inspired and aware, and you rise up to faith and courage, right? Just the willingness. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is death in the now of the spirit. If you are in a state of fear, then you're already dead, but you can be inspired. So step into it. Say, no, I will not comply with anything that causes harm and death to our natural environment. Instead, I will do the opposite. I will stand with faith and courage in what I know is true. Service and joy and laughter and family. And then when we recognize this, when we deeply recognize that the most selfish thing that we could do as individuals. Now, some of you are going, what? I don't want to be selfish. That's a program. That's a lie. That's a deception. And when we get to the truth of the matter, that we live in a system of free energy everywhere, of radical abundance, it's the nature of our system, right? We might not have it around us. We might not know how to get it. But as proof, we're putting up all over with your help, more places, proof of what I'm talking about. It's not a hypothetical, it's a demonstrable proof, right? So when we become aware that the most selfish thing we could ever do is love each other and serve each other and serve our land, it blows away all the paradigms of scarcity. That leads to fear. That leads to recruitment for war. It's time right now to stand up with faith and courage, to feel the energy rising in you, to feel it and be like, oh my God, I am powerful. I am connected again. I'm plugged in again. You take the fear out and you plug in to God, to source. And then don't get funny about it. Don't get all arrogant about it, because then we go right back into this other silliness. Just be present and be aware to the best of your ability. And when you catch yourself in your mind, in your heart, in your stomach, tightening up, you're one breath away from faith and courage and from doing what is right. And when you say it that clearly to any oppressor, well, you'll be doing the right thing. What the oppressor does, it's not your concern. Let that go, because what you're doing is standing with the ultimate power. Love, my friends, and have a great day.